Hello leaders, Patrick Jinks here, leadership and strategy coach and president of the Jinks Perspective. This week, a friend, a colleague, an expert, and a true champion of nonprofit leaders. Don't go anywhere. The past several weeks have featured some colleagues and experts in nonprofit consulting as we've collaborated on a series that we've called Leading Through Crisis. The reason that Charles, Forrest, Tom, and Casey and I are even connected to begin with is due in large part to today's guest, Madeleine McGee. Madeleine is president of Together SC, South Carolina's nonprofit association, and her nonprofit leadership capabilities and experiences are extensive over 3 decades, from leading downtown revitalization efforts to running the Coastal Community Foundation for 10 years to her current role, leading a state nonprofit association with more than 800 members. I don't know anyone more passionate about the sector. I don't know anyone more passionate about supporting small nonprofits and their leaders, and I certainly don't know anyone more passionate about equity. She recently sat down for a Zoom chat with me. Madeleine, welcome to the show, the program, whatever, the channel. I've really been looking forward to this. Thanks for carving out time to take a few minutes with us and share your thoughts. I want people to understand very clearly why I invited you to do this. I've done a little bit of an introduction of you already, but I want to reiterate that you've got a view of this, a perspective of this that is unique, as you're getting to see this thing from a wide angle, whereas most of the people watching this channel, they're in the trenches. They're right in the work is right in front of them. The challenge and the crisis is sitting here right in front of them with the weight of the world on their shoulders. You're kind of seeing that from a broad perspective. And so, first of all, again, thank you for coming on to the program, and thank you for sharing all of the content that Charles and Tom and Forrest and Casey and I have been putting out. Together SC has been a great venue to be very generous about sharing that content. So thank you and welcome to the show.
Of course. But I do have to make one correction, Patrick. I'm not seeing anything except the 4 walls of this room.
Well, okay.
I am hearing an awful lot. But as I sit on Sullivan's Island, on the very edge of this state, on an island that's been in lockdown, no one can even come on, I'm not seeing anything. And it makes it very hard. And it makes the Zoom calls very much appreciated. I think I shared with you a communication pyramid that someone talked, on degrees of engagement. And the Zoom calls are actually, higher engagement than emails. And I have to say, I really appreciate the engagement the Zoom calls offer. They're tiring, but it's better than looking at these 4 walls all day.
I agree, and people need the connection. I've been encouraging people, a lot of board meetings, for example, are taking place over Zoom, and I really urge board members, I don't know how you feel about this, but I really urge board members, turn your video cameras on. A lot of people want to hide and, I'll just put my profile picture up or a silhouette, but I'll be on the call. There's something about seeing your smiling face, your nodding head, your hand raised on Zoom that gives people at least a feeling of connection. Would you agree?
I would. And I'd say that's something we should be more deliberate about. In fact, just as we set codes of conduct for our meetings that are in person, we need to have an agreed upon code of conduct, how we're going to engage on Zoom calls. As you know, since you were there with us, we recently had a Together SC board meeting and attempted to do that. We're all still learning the technology, but it absolutely helps when we agree we're all going to be on live and in person and sharing.
Yeah.
We're all going to use the chat box, or we're all going to mute our mics. You just have to pay attention to those details.
Absolutely. Well, all of the people watching this right now are not in the state of South Carolina. Many of them are. And so you lead an association. Together SC is an association for the nonprofits in South Carolina. And I know some of the work you do in advocacy and otherwise expands beyond the borders, but you're primarily focused on South Carolina. but you're looking again at a bigger picture, at least conceptually, you're looking at it. Where are you spending your time? What's the association sort of seeing, hearing, feeling, getting engaged with to help nonprofits right now?
Well, we started 6 weeks ago doing 2 webinars a week every Wednesday, one with our philanthropic partners in conjunction with our United Way Association and our Grant Makers Network, and then one just for nonprofit leaders. So we're spending a lot of time figuring out what the content should be on those calls, who should be speaking, what the resources are. They each take a very different direction. Outside of that, we are struggling like everyone else to understand everything that's happening in DC and to bring that information to our members so that they can respond and prepare. We've spent an amazing amount of time working on the PPP loans and helping people to access that. By the time this video airs, I'm guessing most people will have heard whether or not they're going to get those funds and whether they'll have that extra support for the next 2.5 months for payroll. But that's been a lot of the work since April 2nd, or when that passed. So I think as we start May, it's a good time to say, what's the next to-do list for what should be on our to-do list for May and June?
That's a great question because, first of all, I think COVID-19 has made time stand still. People are not, it's almost everybody I talk to struggles to even know what day of the week it is. And the weeks seem like months sometimes. So we've been engaged in this now for a little while. May and June coming up, states reopening at different paces, but starting now. So what is the next piece of vision on the horizon? If the horizon is defined as sort of that May, June, and starting to head into a new fiscal year for many organizations, what to you should be on that horizon in terms of things to pay attention to?
Well, if you do start a new fiscal year in July, as much as we have let ourselves sort of ignore some of the day-to-day things that we typically undertake this time of year, we've got to go back and start working on some of those things. That's budgeting for next year. That's executive board transition. I will share the decision that the Together SC board made. Typically, we would be inviting new board members to consider joining us in April, May, June, and we deliberately decided to postpone that, and we'll be inviting people in July and August, asking them to step up and start serving in September and October. So we've asked some of the board members that were perhaps going to step off to give us an extra couple of months so that we could do that. We did go forward with the election of new officers. We did that at our board retreat 2 weeks ago. They will step out July 1. We're paying much more attention to the transition between officers. Melanie Huggins from the Richland Library, as you know, is our current board chair. Monroe Free from Greenville Habitat will be stepping up. Monroe will be joining my monthly calls with Melanie for May and June so that he can understand the issues we're facing. So paying much more deliberate attention to the transition of leadership that you've got at the board level, I think is important for all of us.
Well, I appreciate you talking about some of these governance things. I know you saw Charles Weathers was with us on the program a couple of weeks ago and talked about governance at length and the role of a board and supporting your CEO. And are there any other sort of governance things to think about right now? I mean, what are those things that boards need to pause on right now, like maybe prospecting and electing new board members, versus the things that we do not need to pause right now? They need to stay on go. We can't let them take a back seat just because of COVID-19. What other sort of governance tips or things do we need to be looking at?
Well, one thing that our board has chosen to put on pause is my annual evaluation, which is a fairly detailed process of my review of my performance, their review, calls, engagement, all to inform next fiscal year. And it's been agreed we do not have the time. That is not where we need to be focusing right now. So we will do that later in the summer. What we have added, And this is one of the things I love about Melanie. So is, as a CEO, particularly of a smaller nonprofit, which is what Together SC is, we face that challenge of trying to be the chief operating officer, getting things done with our small team, making sure everything's happens, and also being that chief strategy officer, trying to plan ahead and think. And it's really hard to do both. And Melanie said to me, let's carve out time to talk once a week, and let me use that time to help you with that forward-looking part of the work, so that I can ask questions, much like you do for us, Patrick. You're wonderful about this work, because I don't know about others, but to go from worrying about getting something done tomorrow to thinking about next year, it's a hard shift sometimes. So having someone help you by asking questions and talking about it with you can be very helpful. So Melanie and I are putting in weekly calls, and I hope that pretty much every board chair and CEO are doing that. Sorry.
That's some of the best advice I've heard in weeks. Constant communication between a chair and an executive director. And something else that I've said in every one of these videos in this series is that's something we should be doing anyway, outside of a crisis. But boy, does it mean more now than ever. I think what's happening, and those of us that have been involved in this collaboration, Forrest, Charles, Casey, and Tom and I, we've been in our own conversations, obviously thinking about this content, and we keep repeating to ourselves that COVID-19 hasn't made things. Let's see, how does Forrest put it? Forrest and Charles both say this better than I do. That COVID-19 is not calling on new leadership skills. It's just illuminating the importance of leadership skills. They don't say it that way. They definitely say it better. But I think you understand what I'm saying, is that these are things that we always ought to be doing, communicating with our staff and engaging them, meeting with our board chair, being calm, casting vision. We're talking about all those things right now. We need to be doing those all the time. They're just so much more important right now. And I appreciate that you and Melanie have that worked out. And it's part of why your organization ticks so well, quite honestly. Let me ask you this. There's two things that you are in a unique position to give advice on. Number one, and you've just said them both. Number one, you are a nonprofit CEO. So you know exactly what these leaders are feeling right now, because you're feeling it too. You're running your own organization. The second thing is you are the CEO of a small nonprofit organization. Small is relative, I understand. Small for some organizations is a $200,000 annual budget, and they're the only staff, and some even smaller than that. You're not quite that small, but you don't have 30 staff people and a independent legal counsel on staff and a whole big marketing department and all these things. What is your best advice for nonprofit leaders, particularly in small organizations? Like, what are you finding to give you grounding and base and centering and focus? What would be maybe just one or two things that you would share that are working for you that you would share with other leaders in your shoes?
Shared leadership, which is always important, but I think even more important now. Last week, we had a wonderful business partner, just like you, do a session for us, and her closing slide was what are you going to do next? And on that was develop a thought leadership team and proactively reach out to board members with specific skills and ask them to help individually. And I cut that out and pasted it on my computer screen, whatever we call that. It's not, I don't know how you, and I'm referring to it regularly. That's become my sort of to-do list reminder. Because as a small nonprofit leader, we don't have all the expertise on our staff, and we don't have it ourselves. So this is the chance to engage the board members and ask them, where do I find an HR expert to help me understand what the options are with our staff? Where do I find someone to help me with the financial planning? And I think there's a lot of expertise that is out there and people that want to help. In fact, we've had the Chamber in Charleston offer, in conjunction with the College of Charleston, to professors on call, profs on call, to help coach on very specific projects. We haven't announced it yet because we're still working out, but it's underway. And I know throughout our communities, we can find people that we can call on to help us think through very targeted, specific issues that we need to focus on. So share the leadership and get your team around you. And the one-on-one phone calls are what are getting me through it. The Zoom calls I'm loving because we're seeing and connecting, but the one-on-ones really. And when the board member, I don't know if you read Mondays for Good Connection, but Adela shared the story of one of the board members of one of her funding organizations reaching out and calling and saying, I'm just calling to check and see how you're doing. And I think that kind of connection, whether it's board to staff, whether it's staff to volunteers, whether it's CEO to development director, or whether it's funders to staff, those one-on-ones, nurturing conversations, showing that we're there and we're caring and we're listening, are so important right now.
It's the little things, isn't it? Right now, just that outreach. I mean, it prompted, I know Adela well, and it prompted her to celebrate that and say that meant a lot to me for someone really out of the blue, a funder, to just say, hey, what can I do for you right now? I thought that was great. I want to emphasize before it looks like you have something to add.
The very first week of this, I said, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. But what it is an emotional marathon. We can do the work and keep going, but the level of uncertainty and therefore tension is greater than anything I've experienced in my life. All I can imagine is what it's like to be in a war zone. Is this going to last another week? Is it going to last another month? And that level of uncertainty around us, I think it's very easy to take even optimistic people and cause them to be anxious and pessimistic. And so hence my celebrate everything sign. I am having to work really hard at staying positive about all of this. Getting the PPP loan yesterday really helped, but I think we have to, give ourselves a break when we get anxious, but then find whatever it is that gets us back and allows us to be the support and cheerleader for our board, for our staff. And I don't think I've done as good a job as I should have. And so to my staff, I say, I'm sorry, I'm working at it. But that's a really important thing for small nonprofit. We are the spirit of our organizations.
Absolutely. And I just want to say this before I ask you one closing question. I just want to say to you, you say I'm not doing a good job of it, or I may not be doing a good job of it. I've known you for 5 years, and I think you've done a tremendous job of it. I think one of your strengths, and I think our viewers can really benefit from this, you focus on relationships. When you say shared leadership, you've practiced that. You engage people like me who are in business to help nonprofits. You engage me in your work. You have those resources to call on because you've established the relationships. You've taken the time, the energy to do that, and you've put yourself out there to do that. So I just want the viewers to know that when Madeleine says shared leadership is something that is working for her, I'm telling you from firsthand experience and watching it on the front lines, she practices that, and it absolutely is. The Together SC network is incredible. And I've been a part of nonprofit associations in several other states as a former United Way executive. And I don't think there's any that have any more value and connection and a feeling of a real network and a movement than Together SC. I wanted to say that to you on the line because to me, I tell people all the time, it's a no-brainer. If you're a nonprofit in South Carolina and you're not connected and engaging in Together SC, not good. Like there's a real value in it.
But it's like anything else. You get out of it what you put into it. And if you want to engage, there's engagement there. I think you've elevated that, though. I think you've put a lot more out there recently, and I know our network appreciates it. My last question, I want to refer to your Celebrate Everything sign. What are one or two things that you're celebrating right now through all of this? What is the good you're seeing? Either something that's worked, has just come up serendipitously for Together SC, or a story about one of our members. What's the good you're seeing right now that we should be celebrating through this time?
I think that this event is going to cause us to move much faster into things we were already doing before. And I am very, very hopeful, fingers crossed, hands and prayers, that we are going to do this in a more equitable way, and that those parts of our state that have been left behind before will not be left behind on this. We will get broadband to our rural communities. We will look at what a meaningful wage needs to be. We will address the issues of child care. We will work to have the supports that people need so that there's an opportunity for all to advance. I just, when the summit ended, after we'd spent all that time talking about the issues of white privilege and how white privilege dominates our society and the opportunities to advance issues of racial equity, when this thing hit, it was devastating to me. I was like, no, just when we were getting ready to move on all this. But now as I listen and I look back and I said, that's why this is happening. That's why this is happening. This is the Hugo to our inequities. When Hugo revealed that, the substandard housing conditions that we had on the barrier islands of South Carolina, they weren't caused by Hugo, they were exposed by Hurricane Hugo. And that's what this is going to do. It's going to help expose the inequities in our system across the state. And if we work together and we speak up and we inspire and we encourage, I really, really think our state is going to address these issues in an equitable way. And to that, I say to everyone on the Accelerate SC team and our governor and our state legislators, please invite the nonprofit leaders to be part of this work with you. We stand ready. We are your partners in it, and we know how to make it happen. And sorry, Patrick, you shouldn't have asked that question.
I am so glad I asked that question, because that just inspired me, Madeleine. If that, I had a pastor one time that used to say, if that doesn't stir you, your spoon done fell out your bowl. and that's stirring. And here's what I love about it. You've talked about some things that you're celebrating, PPP money, for example, but you just framed the answer to that question for the future, that we will be celebrating movement on these inequities in the future because of this. And I love that. That's just pure vision casting. So thank you for that.
And just one other thing, I don't think I realized quite how invisible our nonprofit sector was to many of our state leaders. And that's going to change. We are speaking up for the sector. We are speaking up together. We are working together both locally and across the state, in Columbia, in the state house, in town halls. We have to engage with our leaders and show them that we're part of the solution.
That's good. I think the theme of what you're saying is we have to walk through this with having learned something that we can apply when this is behind us. So thank you for reminding us of that and for practicing it every day, Madeleine. I really appreciate what you're doing. And thanks again for coming on the show. I know we'll be in touch down the line. We don't intend for our connectivity with the sector to stop collaboratively. And so I know that we'll be engaged many more times in the future to come.
I need to give you a shout out, as we said, when I said engage your partners, Together SC is 800 members strong. About 10% of those are business partners like Jinx Perspective, and we could not do this work without y'all. We know that oftentimes the best thing we can do for a nonprofit is say, give Charles a call, give Patrick a call, connect them with the resources that can work with them in a much deeper way with an expertise that we do not have on staff. So to all the businesses that are out there supporting our nonprofit sector, please know how much we appreciate it. And that partnership is so critical to the work we do. So thank you, my ally for good.
Yeah, well, that's what I love about Together SC's tagline, Allies for Good. And it is. It comes from all different angles. Leadership comes from all sides. And somebody, one of my good friends put a drinking game on Facebook the other day. It said, every time you hear a commercial that says we're in this together, take a drink. But we are. We're demonstrating that.
We changed the name 3 years ago to Together
Yeah.
SC.
Yeah.
And I have a Google alert for Together SC. And when all this started, the number of articles that I started getting sent jumped tenfold. Not because we were in the stories, but because everyone's talking about togetherness in a way that Google's picking up. And I was like, gee, we really knew what we were doing when we renamed this organization.
Well, you did, and it's great, and I appreciate it. Thanks again, Madeleine. Great insight.
Thank you, Patrick.
Madeleine, thank you for your work. And for all the cape-wearing superhero nonprofit leaders out there, thank you. We are stronger because of you. That's the Jinx Perspective for this week. Check out the Together SC website in the video description below this video. There's a link there with tons of tremendous resources for you. And as always, if you'd like to explore ways that the Jinx Perspective can help you and your organization achieve greater clarity, simplicity, and alignment in your mission work, reach out and schedule a free discovery call with me by clicking the link that's also in the video description below. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel below and click the bell icon to notify you when we drop new episodes. And please, think of a friend or a colleague who you think might benefit from this material and share it with them. See you here next week.